3.01 Politics of the Renaissance. This flipped lesson goes along with student workbook pages 56 to 58. Lesson Introduction: The Spread of New Ideas. The Renaissance wasn't limited to art and literature in Italy. Merchants, soldiers, scholars, and monks spread the new ideas when they headed north. Northern European artists and thinkers incorporated the Renaissance ideas into their own work. Many political and religious ideas that we take for granted today have their roots in the Renaissance. Machiavelli challenged the political world. In politics, as in art, Italians looked to the classical world for inspiration. New ideas and realities forced people to rethink their standards of behavior. Castellone introduced the ideal courtier or Renaissance man. Isabella d'Este lived the life of a Renaissance woman, and Machiavelli looked at human behavior in new ways. All three presented how to be successful, lessons attuned to the times. Lesson Objectives: Identify Castellone and his view of the ideal Renaissance courtier. Define courtier. Explain why Leonardo da Vinci is sometimes considered a Renaissance man and give examples of his interests and accomplishments. Identify Isabella d'Este as a Renaissance woman who ruled a city-state and made it a center of learning and art. Identify Machiavelli as the Italian author of The Prince. Summarize the main ideas of The Prince and describe the influence it had on European rulers. Powers in Italy. This starts number 1 in your student guide on page 56. In the 16th century, Italy had many centers of power. In each, you could find ambitious rulers such as the Medici in Florence, the Pope in Rome, or the Doge in Venice. Each ruler knew that his success greatly depended on the people who advised him. So rulers surrounded themselves with brilliant courtiers. A courtier was a well-educated person who served in the ruler's court. Some courtiers were scholars, some were artists, and many were nobles. Courtiers' roles included giving advice on how to build a new palace, repair a cathedral, fix a canal, construct defensive walls, deliver messages, negotiate a treaty with a neighboring city-state, lead troops into war, translate an ancient Greek manuscript, discuss philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics, and tell an amusing story and sing a ballad. Baldassare Castellone. Baldassare Castellone was a courtier to Francesco Gonzaga, the Prince of Mantua and the Duke of Urbino. He wrote the Book of the Courtier, which was a how-to guide that described how a courtier should act while serving at court and how he could best serve his prince. Castellone based some of his book on the writings of the ancient Roman statesman Cicero and on the medieval code of chivalry. Advisors to the Renaissance. The education and intelligence of advisors was more important during the Renaissance compared to earlier times. This is because warfare had changed and now required intellectual strength. Renaissance princes wanted good strategists, engineers, and advisors. The Renaissance courtier. Castellone believed that a good Renaissance courtier still needed some qualities of a chivalrous knight, such as courage, horsemanship, and good swordsmanship, for battle at close range. He also thought courtiers should know how to wrestle, swim, jump, and run. A courtier should be able to read and write in both Latin and Greek. He should be able to discuss art and philosophy with his prince, as well as draw, paint, dance, and play some musical instruments. Here is a chart of the perfect Renaissance man or woman with Castellone's ideas, and then how Isabella d'Este and Leonardo da Vinci fulfilled those ideas. At any point in time, you may stop the video and fill in some additional notes as needed. This chart is not on your student guide. This is a second page to the chart. Isabella d'Este. Isabella d'Este was the wife of Francesco Gonzaga. She advised her husband on many diplomatic matters. During her husband's absence, she ruled Mantua. She managed to secure her husband's release when the Venetians imprisoned him. She was a dedicated patron of the arts. She made Mantua a center of learning and art. She was also an artist, poet, and writer. The Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire straddled Europe and Asia and rose to power during the early Middle Age. Ambitious emperors expanded the empire. The empire was a center of trade, and the trade goods went to and came from distant parts of the world. Scholarship thrived, and many educated men moved to Byzantium. Niccolò Machiavelli. The two issues always on the minds of princes in the Renaissance Italy were politics and war. Niccolò Machiavelli was a Florentine diplomat who had strong feelings about what he believed Italy's princes needed to be able to do. He wrote The Prince, a book which analyzed the politics of Renaissance Italy. He is considered the father of modern political science. Machiavelli thought a good ruler should do whatever was necessary to secure and unite his state. The Prince. The main subject of The Prince is how to create and maintain a secure state, or how to acquire and hold power. Machiavelli found information for his book from lessons learned in his study of classical history and the lessons he learned by studying the triumphs and failures of Caesar Borgia and others. The ends justifies the means. Machiavelli's ideas of a good ruler were different from that of medieval philosophers. Medieval philosophers had stated that a ruler should exercise power virtuously for the common good of his people, and that he should base his actions on Christian principles. Machiavelli argued that a good ruler should do whatever was necessary to secure and unite his state. Machiavelli declared that to hold on to power, a prince must act as circumstances required. A famous saying that expresses his idea is, "The ends justifies the means." Is it better to be loved or to be feared? Machiavelli's belief that one ought to be both, but as it is difficult for the two to go together, it is much safer to be feared than to be loved. The Prince gave European rulers new ideas, some good, some bad, about how to govern. The Prince made rulers and their counselors think less about abstract ideals and more about actual human conduct and likely results. Because of the influence of his book, Machiavelli is considered the father of modern political science. And we have come to the end of this flip video lesson. Learning is the only thing the mind never exhausts, never fears, and never regrets.